stand up here and talk about criminal justice without talking about race. So, it's, if you have not read it, or you do not have it, get it from here, get it from wherever you can get it, The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. Everyone needs to read this book. And I have to, again, begin these remarks by recognizing that I stand here as a white woman standing in front of you, and that this criminal justice discussion cannot be talked about without fundamentally talking about race and racism. And so, again, I am humbled to stand here then with all my categories and talk about this. And I really believe, please hear me say this, that I really believe that the changes that are going to come from the experts by experience and from the people who can and who do not look anything like me, and really should not look anything like me. There are ways that white people and majority people and all kinds of folks can ally and join this work and should, but that the fundamental changes that we're talking about need to be led by those who know. So what am I doing here? Why am I standing up here in front of you? I'm standing up here to tell you a story. That's really all I want to do tonight, is tell you a story that I got to be part of and that I was blessed to be part of. And after I tell you, you're actually going to see it in much shorter and better form. But I want to tell you because I think it has great implications on what we can do in the future. I think it tells a story of kind of where we have most recently been in the past, where we are currently standing, and where we can move to. So this story starts, and let me say that I want to re-echo what Brother Awula said, and that is we stand on amazing shoulders. This work came after years and years and years of toiling and working for change, and for roundtables, and for rallies, and for all kinds of things. However, this time there is a woman with great faith and great conviction who came herself as a directly affected person. This story starts with a mama who had 2 sons who were incarcerated and who also happened to be your majority leader at the time in the assembly. And we have such a stigma and such a shame around prison and prison issues in our communities that she couldn't even speak about it. Very few people knew that she had 2 sons who were incarcerated, and it wasn't actually until they got out and she began to see that children of politicians actually were facing the same, if not worse, barriers than anybody, right? And so my goodness, if she knew it firsthand, she knew the realities of sentencing and disposition, she knew the realities of what was going on or not inside the prisons, and then she knew the unbelievable barriers that people were facing coming outside of the prison. And she's you all know her very well, I know, and I'm sure she's a very strong woman of faith, and said, I believe God has put me in the position to do something about this, and so I'm going to do it. And so then I get involved in the story because Bonnie Watson Coleman wanted to do this differently. She wanted to do this where she didn't just invite people to come into Trenton and give their testimony, and then try and formulate some policies. And she wanted to go to the neighborhoods that were hardest hit. She didn't want people to have to come to her. She wanted to go to them. And so she organized community-based public hearings all across the state in the areas that were hardest hit by incarceration, by mass incarceration, by thousands and thousands and thousands of Black and brown people going into large state facilities, not usually in the towns or areas that they're in. And so as she started this process, she not only went into these communities, 7 communities all the way from Patterson to Bridgeton, right? She held 2 roundtables, and she went inside and brought legislators into 4 state correctional facilities. We sat down and talked with the men and women who are locked up currently about their own experiences and recommendations for change. And so, as a result, as we started gathering this public testimony, based on the voices and the stories of the people who knew it and who lived it. We were finally able, as we were putting these things together, we had 1,500 people come out and share their stories. That's a lot of people. That's a movement, folks. And that's a movement of people who are most directly affected, who are leading this charge. There is now a national movement called the Formerly Incarcerated and Convicted People's Movement. And they talk, speaking of race, they talk about how this perpetuation of what we've done from slavery, that started in slavery, continued all the way through Jim Crow, and now is being perpetuated in terms of our criminal justice system and the prison industrial complex. And quite frankly, if we don't begin to speak honestly about that and chip away at that, then we risk putting the same things in place in terms of permanent disenfranchisement and permanent marginalization of people of color. We now have a system that does not just give sentences for a short amount of time, or it actually doesn't even matter. It could be 2 years or 20 years. You get out of prison, you have a life sentence, right? Yes. We know this. We have created, we have perpetuated this in every way possible. Housing, schooling, jobs, name it. Driver's license. So all of these things, we began to really listen to, look, and try to figure out how to chip away at it. And so out came, well, lots and lots and lots of ideas. And this was formed, I should say that there was a steering committee. Again, I see my brother Mike Jackson in the room. I see my brother Mike Kahn in the room, who are both going to talk to you later, who are the experts in this, but who walked alongside of this. And this took 18 months. And there was a working group, a representative working group that represented all kinds of organizations across the state. But again, centered on those who were most directly affected. And I can't emphasize that enough, that this work needs to, this stuff needs to, the reform needs to, the changes need to come from that place, and then the rest of us can come around that, and need to come around that. Service providers, advocates, policy think tanks, academics, we need to come around it. But the place it needs to start, again, is where it started with this movement. So, 18 months later, we knew that our best bet was to get these bills through in lame duck. That Governor Corzine was on his way out, right? And we knew that these bills and the kinds of things that we were asking and the political risk that this was would only be taken really in lame duck time. And so I won't bore you with the details of how the bills actually ended up getting signed that day. I will tell you that they initially cost $33 million, and that the charge to all of us was to take that down to as close to zero as we could get in these economic times. We managed to squeeze in about $3 million, but these bills started, when they were originally dropped, they were dropped as 33 individual bills. So we actually like to say that we passed 33 bills, not 3 bills, but they were packaged eventually in these omnibus packages, and so it's 3 pretty comprehensive bills. I have a handout, if I can just, I'll pause for a second while, and this handout, this particular handout says we did it. The handouts along the way as we were shaping and building this process would say, we heard you, right? So this was the first time when people could look at the policies that were coming out. You have this already? Oh, excellent. Okay.